Hello, once again, thank you for joining. We're going to get going just about now. Just want to thank you all for joining the webinar this morning, WSP Snack and Learn on the role of placemaking and community in creating a resilient place, how all that comes together. Excited to talk to you about this um, to this audience. Just a little bit of information here. We are going to remind everyone that we're going to be taking questions at the end of the presentation. And if you put questions in the chat box, we'll get those and we'll answer those at the end of the question. Okay, thank you. So we're going to get started now. So going to talk a little bit today about, what is resilience, what is placemaking, how those come together to really create a community, why is that important, and then some lessons learned from some of the projects that we've, applied the strategy on that really combine infrastructure investments and placemaking to really create a community and support community. So my name is John Loughran. I lead WSP's national urban design and placemaking practice. Once again, national, work all over the country, and the projects that you see here represent that. And my Northeast lead, Miranda Zhang, is going to introduce herself, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of our projects as well. So I guess we don't have Miranda, but Miranda, once again, I'm the national, oh, there you go, Miranda.
Oh, sorry, I'm mute. Hello, everyone. This is Miranda Zhang. Nice to speaking with you today.
Okay. So once again, a national practice all over the United States. And I'm going to start this presentation with a little bit of this was just a Google search I did. I Googled resilient cities, and this web page came up. And just a random search. I just want to see what the thoughts are on resiliency and sustainability and placemaking to the outside world. So what I want to point about this one is the biggest link here in this blog post is really cool pavements research builds as temperature rise. When most of us think about resiliency, it's really environmental resiliency, and this is a really good example of it. So I want to point out on the right hand side of this page though, the top story is a coalition launches about wages and minimum wages and tipped income wages in Washington, D.C. The last story in the bottom is about a California-based proposition, Prop 22, that's really about, at heart, it's our Uber drivers, Lyft drivers classified as independent contractors or not. And the reason why I bring this up is that this really shows the way that we think about resiliency and how it ties back to community. Yes, it's about environmental resiliency, that's very important, but it's also about the policies and the places that affect community, right? So you can't really have this environmental sustainability and resiliency if you're not thinking about the community and the occupants and the residents and how they function. So really, urban design and placemaking, when you overlay resiliency, it's really about people and places. It's about how design can support people. It's about how people use space. It's about how space supports the needs of community and how different residents come together. So we've created this diagram to really show how everything's interconnected. We take a very holistic approach in our work, and we really look at how what may typically be thought of as a standalone infrastructure investment can really be leveraged to really support a community. So once again, we really look how we can integrate what may be engineering strategies for resiliency into community through a very holistic approach. We collaborate with other disciplines all the time. And really the idea is to really provide wraparound solutions that work together, right? So it's not just about a resiliency strategy, it's about how that strategy creates a great place where people want to live, work, and play, which is a little bit of an overused term. But I use that because it's so important, right? It really is. Like, people want to be in a place they really want to be, right? And by doing this, you can really add significant value for clients by taking what might have been a standalone investment and having that do so much more, i.e. create a community, create a place, really support a destination, and other goals that may not have been achieved if you thought about resiliency alone as a standalone topic subject. So I'm going to talk about a few projects that we've really applied this to. This first one is a project in California, Los Angeles River Downtown Design Dialogue. And this is really about a strategy that at its heart is about flood control, but our approach really was about how you get community access to a natural resource. In this case, the Los Angeles River in Southern California. So WSP was invited by the City of Los Angeles, along with a half dozen other design firms, to to really create a vision for the river. You know, the backstory here is that the Los Angeles River was this amazing resource. You know, the early Pueblos were founded where there was water. This is one of those locations. The earliest settlement in Los Angeles is right nearby this. But over the years, it was disastrous flooding in the 1930s. The United States Army Corps of Engineers channelized the river, and that's how you get the river that the iconic LA River that we all know today. This gigantic flood channel and industrial basin. And it's really designed right now for flood control, right? The natural flows have been broken, whereas there was groundwater recharge in what's a fairly arid part of the world. The intent was really just that the water gets to the sea as quickly as possible. So those natural flows were broken, and the community does not have access to the river. So this was our vision for this stretch of the competition, the visioning exercise. So really, what I want to take away here is that this was really about naturalizing the river, getting people to the river. That was our charge, right? Our charge was how to integrate engineering solutions. It's still primarily a flood control channel, but how to bring people to the water's edge. So at the heart of it is our approach for the Los Angeles River, but because we think about this in a more integrated, wider approach, we also thought about other assets nearby that could benefit from this new river access. So one of them is State Historic Park, which was just renovated by the state, and a new ball field just across the river, which is actually a ball field over a flood control infrastructure. So we took an approach that was really about connecting these assets, right? So on-grade streets had incorporated rainwater strategies, it incorporated walkability. And so it really was about taking this asset and connecting it, realizing that it doesn't stand alone. This is actually a fairly low-income community, some real socioeconomic challenges. So this was really a very much needed resource. And then, of course, because of that, Southern California has a acute shortage of housing. We added housing as well, because once again, it's not about a specific investment, but it's about getting to a complete community and what that place is like. So this is what that vision really looks like. This is in the river. And so we've taken what is a water channel that always has water in it sometimes, or always has water in it, but sometimes this whole channel is filled. So understood how the water flows can impact this, the scouring action of the water, but also recognize the fact that most of the times this is not really needed for flood control and the community can have access to it. So that's just one strategy, once again, primarily a flood control initiative, but how we can get people to that asset and really leverage that investment in engineering costs. So I'm going to pass it to Miranda, who's going to talk a little bit about a project in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Thank you, John. So a little bit background. Bridgeport is a historical seaport city that is about 60 miles northeast of New York. Sitting at the junction of the Quantic River and Long Island Sound, the city is facing significant environmental challenges, especially flood risks. Next. So Resilient Bridgeport is a federally funded project as part of the response to the extensive damage caused by Hurricane Sandy. It is focused on the South End community, which is the most vulnerable coastal neighborhood in Bridgeport. The community, the South End, is home to over 6,000 residents in historical houses. Many of them are low-income and minority population. And there is also University of Bridgeport campus, the regional power facilities on the east, and a Olmsted-designed historical park, Seaside Park, on its south. Next. The WSP team developed a comprehensive resiliency strategy and also pilot projects to implement the flood risk reduction measures on the east side of the South End neighborhood. The key component of it is a flood protection barrier, a flood wall in simple words, that is up to 12 feet elevation through the middle of the neighborhood. And through the project, the main task we completed include the design alternative analysis, the engineer design solutions, environmental review, and also a robust public engagement process. Next. So the community members and stakeholders, as I mentioned, directly affected by the flood risks are the people the project is designed to serve. So their input is really the key to the success of the project. We maintain ongoing public involvement through the process to engage community members, for every step of the study. That public events include open house, design workshops, site tours, lectures, discussions, and also online engagement. This page is showing some photos of the events. There was really active discussion, and we helped the team to learn and understand the community's concern and needs, and make that as the guide for our design considerations and strategy development. Next. So in terms of the design concept, we take an approach to rather than deploy a standard engineer solution to build, a typical flood wall, we integrate the flood protection barrier and also stormwater management into a new public landscape network. For example, this page is showing the proposed concept for University Avenue. We raised the street to a 12 feet high to provide dry grass during the stormwater events, and in the rendering above, you can see that the flood wall, as shown in red, is embedded into a raised street and also a set of blue-green landscape elements on both sides of it for stormwater management. Next. And at the Seaside Park entrance, as I mentioned before, the elevated plaza will form a new gateway to connect the campus, the park, and the community, and as a high ground to provide beautiful views of the park and also Long Island Sound. At the same time, the stormwater collected from inside of the flood wall will be pumped into the plaza and then spill into the park through a series of water features and the channels, as you can see on the rendering, and eventually flow out to the Long Island Sound. Next. So the takeaway from this project is really to leverage infrastructure investments to address multiple goals and community needs. And to do that, it's important to engage the community through every step of the process. Through the integrated landscape approach, the Bridgeport project goes beyond just flood protection. It also provides improved connectivity, enhanced redevelopment opportunities, and attractive new public landscape. And this will ultimately help to redefine the city's relationship with water. Next. So I'll turn back to John.
Yes, thanks, Miranda. So our last project is about replacing highway infrastructure. So this project is in Miami, Florida. This is actually a rebuild of a 1950s highway that connects I-95, the main north-south corridor on the East Coast, from I-95 to Miami Beach. So it goes through downtown Miami, across Biscayne Bay, and touches down in Miami Beach. So you can see this is the highway just after it was constructed. That's during construction. So it's really interesting because we often talk about highways severing communities, and as you can see, this the size of this cloverleaf did a lot more than just sever a community, right? So so that's the history, that's the context. So the replacement for the I-395 highway really has been decades in the planning and the making. So our our involvement was really a design workshop charrette process to assure that the communities and the city's vision for this park that was being developed under the elevated highway came through. It was a private sector development partnership with the city, so they wanted to make sure that this new open space under the new elevated highway really reflected the city's needs and the community's needs. So the highway goes through a really rapidly redeveloping neighborhood. You know, we were building on a history of a lot of past planning, and also overcoming, the negativity of this highway that had literally plowed through this very historic neighborhood. So this is the existing highway on the left. The proposed highway is on the right, and so really the the context here was that the new highway was much higher than the old highway and much airier. So there was an opportunity for open space and a very different type of condition than currently exists under the highway. The other thing too is, Miami, Florida is a very hot, humid climate. So actually during the summer months, shade is actually quite desirable. So there are actually some good reasons for having the park under the highway. So we started by looking at how this fits into different scales, right? So on the right is Biscayne Bay and downtown, which of course, Miami is an international destination. So how do we connect to Biscayne Bay, Biscayne Boulevard? A little further inland, that's the rapidly redeveloping area. So how do we get developers that might have turned their back to an elevated highway to front on this new park? How do we connect under the highway? But also, as you went further upland, inland, closer to the connections to I-95, that was really a local neighborhood. That was historically the city's Overtown neighborhood where African-American entertainers would stay when they came to perform in Miami Beach. So it actually had quite a cluster of entertainment, a nexus for Black entertainment. So really interesting history. So anyway, so it goes from really international destination on the right towards Biscayne Bay to more of a neighborhood solution on the left towards the existing I-95 and the Overtown neighborhood. So this is where we started really, and this is really the connection that goes right from I-95 right through this area to where we were studying through Biscayne Bay. And so you can see from this arrow, the I-395 was quite a hurdle, at least graphically, to get under and over to connect the neighborhoods. So that's where we started, right? How do you get under the highway? How do you connect north-south? How do you make it a pleasant experience? How do you link these streets that might have been severed by the highway or just it just wasn't a pleasant place, right? So some of this was changing perception, some was how you change the environment. So really, once again, started very much about a north-south solution. But then we got into the planning, we realized that our planning zone had stopped just short of the Overtown neighborhood. Our original study area was just shy of the Overtown neighborhood. So we realized that the north-south connections shown here in red, the street connections were still very important, but there was this overlay of this east-west through the park connectivity that was so important. So by going just a little further than our original study area, we looked at strategies to get up and over I-95 to connect to the historic Overtown neighborhood and give those people access not just to this new under highway deck park, but just the short 1.5 to 2 miles east to Biscayne Bay and the trail network that's being built along Biscayne Bay. So really it was about access to neighborhood open space, but about this larger connectivity story. So, the real takeaway here is that, you can integrate public space with transportation infrastructure. It's not easy. The takeaway here from a planning perspective is that you need to really keep an open mind. Once again, our task was really to connect north-south on either side of the highway, and through the planning process and the workshop process, we really learned that the east-west connection was really just as important to connect the existing neighborhoods, historic neighborhoods to the waterfront. So once again, the takeaway here is that infrastructure investments can address both environmental and community needs, but you really need to think about that and be open-minded. Once again, I think some of the processes that we use, or all the processes that we use, are intended to bring disciplines together, apply a holistic approach that integrates multiple solutions or addresses multiple challenges with one solution. But really, I think the takeaway here is to have an open mind. Part of our process is really, once again, the workshop process with our peers, but it's also a workshop process with the community and stakeholders. And it's about how those really inform our planning, our design in ways that we don't necessarily intend. And I think this is a really good example, and so is Bridgeport, of that, of a project going not necessarily where you thought it was going when you first started it. So really that's some of our examples. That's our process. That's how we really integrate infrastructure, and resilient strategies with a resilient community. So I'm welcome to hear any questions. Once again, just a reminder, any questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll get to them right now. So
Thank you
thank you.
very much, John and Miranda. If you don't mind displaying the last slide of your deck so that
Oh, yes, of course.
team can see your contact details. So we have a first question. These projects seem to all have an engineering component. What are some of the other disciplines that you work with?
Oh, good question. Once again, it takes a lot to, I do a lot of trans-oriented development, and sometimes we come in with these fairly large teams, and I've gotten some pushback or questions why, why such a large team? And it's because really creating a community is that complex, right? It's about the underlying economics, right? It's about technically, does it work, right? Do your streets handle traffic? Does your transportation connect where people want to go? So it's about the market, but it's also about community needs too. Like, how do you take a market that may not support housing, but how do you catalyze the housing to meet that demand? And of course, then there's the place that's overlaid over that. So we work with landscape architects all the time as well. So really, I think just think about like everything that goes into building a place, and those are pretty much the disciplines we work with. Like I said, pretty typically it's economics and market, landscape architecture, public engagement, almost every single project, and then a lot of transportation planners and engineers as well. So Miranda, any that I missed? I think you're muted.
Yeah, I figured that out. Yeah, just like John said, all the projects we presented today and other projects we try to address resilient issues is always a multidisciplinary team, and the multidiscipline is the key for innovation. And urban design is playing the role that connect all the technical solutions together to provide the vision, but we really the success of the project is really depends on the collaboration of all different disciplines.
Very good. Thank you very much. Next question. What is the budget challenge to your work? Sorry, what is the biggest challenge to your work?
Because I guess challenge is right. I think it's the whole integration and actually conveying to a client that there can be, or the public, I don't say client, the public, and even other consultants or other practice areas we have on our project too, is the fact that you can meet multiple challenges with one solution, right? Not all challenges though. So I think part of the biggest challenge is understanding what can be solved with a physical solution and what can't be solved, right? So part of that is having people integrated throughout the entire discussion. It's setting realistic expectations. We like to say that we create an implementable vision, meaning that whatever we do needs to be supported by the market, whether it's subsidized or whether it's the market as is, realistic timeframes, right? And it has to meet both developer expectations, city expectations, and community needs as well to really be successful. So I think it's really getting to that nexus where there's the overlap. That is the biggest challenge. So Miranda?
Yep, and I think John addressed that very well, but I would admit there's always a budget limit for all the projects, and especially this infrastructure can be expensive. So I guess that's more important that we do more with less to achieve more goals with one project. So that is always, a key principle we try. That's also another big reason we should always apply integrated and holistic approach.
Very good. Next question. How do you differentiate between disaster planning and community resiliency?
Do you want to start that, Miranda, or it sounds like something that builds on Bridgeport?
I think often the disaster planning comes after the fact that, and after the emergency events, and it's often a response to the specific events. For example, a hurricane, Sandy, or other natural disaster events. Compared to the community resiliency planning is generally a proactive measure to take to address multiple goals, and that's a better timing and also the better opportunity. We can think more holistically, comprehensive approach solutions to lead to a long-term change. John?
No, I think that pretty much covered it. That was a great answer.
Very good. Let's take a last question. Are vulnerability assessments embedded in this work? For example, I'm wondering if it's part of the scope of these projects and if you cover this with communities, or if it's done at a different point to make sure climate vulnerabilities are understood and that project design considers climate projections.
Great question. And honestly, a lot of our work is the very upfront work. So we typically don't include the vulnerability assessment in our work because we're very early in the process. We're making recommendations for the next steps. But once again, I think Bridgeport did this. This did come up in Bridgeport, though. Yeah.
Yeah, Bridgeport is a much longer process. It originally for 2 years, and then we extended a little bit, so there was enough time, and the scope does include the vulnerability assessment. But the other two projects are relatively short time project time, and it was more about create the vision, the concept. So it wasn't include that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think too, when you talk about challenges, I think this is one of the challenges because more and more clients want to apply a specific metric, right? How much money did I save? How much time did I save? And with the placemaking, it's very hard to put a dollar figure on that, right? Like I could argue, I could say tangentially that creating a great place creates value, place where you want to live, supports development, creates healthier families. But the vulnerability assessments is actually interesting because it is a place where there can be specific metrics that come out of risk that's involved. So it is something that we're trying to do more of. But once again, a lot of our projects are more upfront, more visioning, but the Bridgeport project is a really good example of, and a little bit after the fact, right, post Hurricane Sandy, but very much an example of how vulnerability assessments can be embedded in our work and part of the design process.
Excellent. We have no further questions, and we reached the end of our webinar session. Thank you so much, John and Miranda, for an excellent presentation. Thank you to all our participants for joining us today. We are going to wrap up the webinar now. Thank you.
One moment. If you want to download this presentation, it is available in the chat. So just that in closing, or feel free to ask Miranda or I any questions you have. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.